Yes, y'all. It's 9:16, February 24th, 2025, Central European Time, and that would make it 3:16 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, USA. I hope everybody is doing well this morning. You survived another day. Yes, you did. Now, things have been heating up here in the EU. I don't know where to start because, with Trump, things are always so fast, constant, not fast, but constant bullshit. And then you have to weed through all the bullshit to focus on what matters, right? And that's been happening. Folks have been adjusting, reading, thinking, communicating, planning, strategizing, and yeah, that's just how it is because of Trump. Right now, Trump is the king of the world. The manifestation of not all billionaires, not all billionaires, but let's just say he's giving you the pure side of what a lot of billionaires, might have. Now, maybe they may not be as extreme as Trump. And some of them, this doesn't apply at all. Some of them can be humanitarians and things like to some degree, right? But Trump obviously embodies that one that is pure what people have feared and talked about. Now for centuries, you could say, there's always one that pops up out and it spreads around. It spreads. And that's just the way it is. But what we're seeing now at the very best is a lunatic, you know, because, that's personal. Being a lunatic is personal, a mental illness, But at worst, we are really seeing, and I hope Americans understand this, you're seeing the downfall of the United States of America. You may as well get ahead of the program very, very fast. And I don't mean to say that in a, how can I say this? In a spookified way. It shouldn't be so abstract. It shouldn't be so unobtainable to understand. It's not so, I don't know. We're not dealing with theology even, right? Of any religious theology, nothing like that. Just core facts. Without trade and trade partners, the United States could and never would have become the power that it is today. Just because World War II was good maneuvering and for security, obviously, because who needs a Nazi authoritarian running around Earth, right? We get that. Thank you very much. And kudos to the people that fought in those wars to stop that type of lunacy, Big up to you and respect, respect. And all of us have to contribute to our societies, in some kind of way and the earth. But that was then, this is now. Today, Trump has embodied these Nazi authoritarian, and he even glorifies it. I mean, he's the embodiment of it, which means the imminent destruction of somebody. Somebody. Now, other people are adjusting because they're saying, hey, this somebody ain't going to be me. I'm not going to be, go under destruction with you. And people are bailing out left and right. There stuff. This, you might be on social media. You might see some things about tariff, boycott this product. But let me tell you, the law, the law of some of these lands, um, they are about to get involved, and they are not playing games. They're not playing games at all. So let's take a look at that and see what that might actually look like.
Volkswagen have launched rolling strikes in an escalating dispute at one of Germany's.
This is German. Look, Germany. Oh my goodness. They actually had an election, and watch what's coming out of it. Watch.
Biggest employers.
The president of the European Council and the European Commission talked about closening ties in their bid to ratify the CETA free trade agreement with Ottawa. The trade tensions between Germany and the United States are having a serious impact, even on what for many years seemed to be the calmest and most harmonious relationship in the Western world. And this time, another economic giant on the other side of the Atlantic, Canada, is also involved. The result is a picture that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago.
Any steel coming into the United States is going to have a 25% tariff.
Germany, the European powerhouse, and Canada, the North American powerhouse, are discussing joint action against the United States tariffs on steel, aluminum, and automobiles. Meanwhile, the European Union continues to stand at the center of the issue, saying, "I have the authority on this issue." How did these states, which call each other friends and allies, end up in such a bitter trade showdown? Moreover, why has Germany's possible cooperation with Canada raised eyebrows even within the European Union?
Listen, now Trump, obviously, just to let y'all know, Trump, he tried to interfere with the German elections. And, you know, here's the thing. When Trump does those kind of things, he also gives European nations a chance to fortify themselves against those things. So the mere fact that Trump tried to interfere in this election in the EU, in Germany, everybody's going to be making adjustments now in terms of election interference. They're already making moves. Obviously, Elon Musk hates the crackdown on disinformation. Putin would hate that, and Trump hates that. But these are core changes that are preserving the society, because people have witnessed the United States basically fall to disinformation, spying, right, and infiltration of its own government. Call it whatever you want. This ain't no conspiracy. This is facts. Yeah, so let's hear some more.
Let us rewind the movie from the beginning, analyze it step by step.
As you know, Howard is Secretary of Commerce, doing a fantastic job. And
It all started when United States President Donald Trump imposed tariffs on steel and aluminum under the slogan, "We must."
Welcome to the location.
We must what? 2 seconds. Hold on. Let me see here. As a matter of fact, let me switch it to this view. Here we go.
America's industries. He argued that this decision was intended to revive his country's steel and aluminum producers, seeing all trade agreements as anti-American. The result, however, came as a shock to the United States' close partners, especially Canada and the European Union. These metals are critical in a wide range of industries, such as automotive, construction, machinery, defense, and so on. Germany is one of Europe's largest steel producers. Canada has been the #1 supplier of steel and aluminum to the United States for decades. When the tariffs came into effect, both countries reacted with what they described as unfair taxes. But Trump did not stop there. He added, "I could impose an additional 25% tariff on cars coming from Europe." At that moment, Germany's biggest concern surfaced. Because the automobile sector is at the heart of the German economy, BMW, Mercedes, and Volkswagen export hundreds of thousands of vehicles to the United States market every year. A tax as high as 25% would significantly increase the price of these vehicles, reduce sales, and leave thousands of people unemployed.
Now look, check this out. I've looked into this pattern, right? And it's got to be obvious to people now, out of many of the scams, and they're not all I mean, these are real things happening. Not that a scam doesn't make it not real, but these fraudulent criminal acts, misuse of government power, you could see they're doing two things. They're trying to use the Nazi theme and to divide people. They're trying to use the racist elements to divide people, and then that's how the disinformation could seep in. That's how the other foreign group, that's how they can get what they want out of this when everyone is divided. So they purposely played on divisions that already exist and then bolstered them, right? So now, but here's the thing that's obvious now. If you follow the markets in the US and you look at some of his tariffs, look at how the car industry is affected. And ask yourself, does this help cars like Ford, American car companies like Ford, any of them, any American car company, does it help them, these tariffs? No. Does it help Germany? No. No. Who does it help? There in the USA, I can only imagine one person that probably is looking to find a way to make this help themselves, or that this is part of the scam. Elon Musk must want to make it so he's the only electric car company. He's the only car charging station owner in America, in the United States. This man wants to he wants to own the United States through buying it, through getting Trump to pass these tariffs and, tinker with the government to get what he wants. And then they're using the hatred, the racism, to keep people distracted. Not that the racism is not real, and not that it won't persist, and not that it won't get worse. But that's obviously the game plan. Stir things up, allow Musk to buy up everything. That's as simplest as I could put this. Now, of course, this is a slap in the face to allies, because American business, the people control by default, by the Constitution. The people control the government. The people are the government. You see, and that's done through voting. But although this last election was a scam, obviously there's been all kinds of voter irregularities and suppression and things like that. And then 80 million people don't vote. But still, in this thing right here, it seems like it's very well set up for Elon Musk to be able to buy up a lot of stuff, right? Control the car companies, control it. Now, Trump, he talks like he doesn't want L vehicles. He's totally against EVs. He's totally against it. He's totally against it. But we know Elon Musk himself sells EVs. We know he owns charging stations. Not all of them, not the whole market, but I bet he wants to own the whole market. I bet he does. That's definitely what Elon Musk wants. He wants to own the whole EV market. Now, just like the old oil companies, they always want to control the energy market, right? And they're resistant to EVs because that affects their business. But the American people got to have their own business. But the long and the short of that one is the U.S. is on the losing stick of this battle. Regardless, the only thing that can be achieved with these tariffs is that Elon Musk ends up owning the EV market in the U.S. by default, like the charging stations and things like that. More access, AI, this kind of thing. More federal grants. This is the main thing that Elon Musk is after. He wants to own the United States of America. And by default, it's people too. Because you got to remember, when you're the owner of all these assets, you basically control a lot of people through them having a need. They need you. They need to cooperate you now. And then the government needs to cooperate private industry. And then the private industry is corrupting the government through payouts and things like this. So just to say that. Now let's flip over to this one now. Because there's more going on, y'all.
A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast, or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast.
Ukrainians have been fighting and dying, not just to protect their sovereignty, their territorial integrity. They're also fighting to protect the rules-based order that keeps us all safe.
Not only did Trump break his promise to bring down grocery prices on day one, but his promise to quickly end that war in Ukraine really meant to quickly give in to his BFF dictator.
Okay, this is the Midas touch, of course.
Putin.
You said you would end the Russia-Ukraine war on your first day in office. Where do things stand right now, and how do you intend?
Well, this is only half a day. I have another half a day left. We'll see.
Trump is doing the bidding of Putin. He's calling Zelensky a dictator because Putin, the one who's been in power for 26 years without elections, calls Zelensky a dictator. Pete Hegseth makes Americans less safe because he goes out and tells the world that evidently we're planning on giving Russia everything they want with regard to Ukraine.
We're hearing that Russia wants to force Ukraine to hold new elections in order to sign any kind of a peace deal. Is that something that the U.S. would ever support?
Well, we have
Oh my God, what the heck is he talking about? Look, you know he's about to say something so imbecile right here. Hold on.
where we
Support.
well, we have a situation where we haven't had elections in Ukraine. We have martial law, or essentially martial law in Ukraine, where the leader in Ukraine, I mean, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating. And where a country has been blown to smithereens. You got most of the cities are laying on this.
Zelensky is at 54%, and that's even right now. That's during the war. You see what I mean? And so Trump blatantly lied.
Sides down at 4%, where the leader in Ukraine, I mean, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4%.
The leader of Ukraine is more popular in his country than Trump is in his own country by far.
Approval rating. And where a country has been blown to smithereens. You got most of the cities are laying on their sides. The buildings are collapsed. It looks like a massive demolition site. The whole, I mean, so many of the cities. I mean, they haven't done it in Kiev because I guess they don't want to shoot too many rockets in there. They've done it 20%, but they haven't done it 100%.
He's basically a Putin apologist.
If they wanted to do it 100%, it would probably.
Trump is a professional Putin apologist. That's it. And this is just, this shows you how self-centered he is. He's so self-centered that if you just flatter him, he will give you everything.
Happen very quickly, but you have cities that are absolutely decimated.
But if you flatter an authoritarian, they will take everything. You got to understand that.
And yeah, I would say that, you know, when they want a seat at the table, you could say the people have to, wouldn't the people of Ukraine have to say, like, you know, it's been a long time since we've had an election. That's not a Russia thing. That's something coming from me and coming from many other countries.
That's something that Putin doesn't like, because Putin wanted to bully them into getting rid of Zelensky. That's what he's been doing the whole time. He's been bullying their elections. Just like you're about to see more of what Trump is doing. Trump has been bullying others outside of the U.S. and their elections. Look at this. And folks, Americans, this is about to hit hard on American citizens first. You got to understand that. Now, I believe MAGA are some very foolish people. Like, seriously, to fall for this, to go for this type of logic, shame on you. But I'm quite sure none of you all realized that doing what you were doing and going along with what you were going along with would equal definitely the fall of the United States of America. Now, if you wanted that, I could understand you continuing with Trump. But if you didn't have that in mind, you might want to break ranks right now and get the hell out of that movement and save your goddamn country. Join your countrymen, you know, yes, liberals and others. Join the 30% that don't vote. How about that? You know what I mean? At the very least. But in any case, you know, because then it would be, you know, no problem at that point if you MAGA people didn't vote, but you do. But there's 30 million Americans that don't vote also. So you got to ask yourself, when you vote, you got to say, what about those other 30 million that don't vote? Is what I'm doing too extreme? Is it going to be too volatile? Is it going to be the destruction of my nation? But you're finding out people are tired of fascism around the world. You're finding out people are tired of racism around the world. You're finding out people are tired. Women are tired. You know, our families are tired, you know, and so MAGA, you have voted against all those things. Education, you voted against healthcare, basic healthcare for people in your own families. You voted against fair, a fair wage, a working wage for people like yourself too. That is insane. And yes, you and your philosophy and your actions, if not averted, will be the fall of the United States. Watch.
He's also
I want to talk about another betrayal that is going on as we speak. And that is his betrayal of the Ukrainian people and everybody who yearns for and fights for freedom and democracy around the world. What we are witnessing is not America first. We are witnessing America in retreat. The Ukrainian people for over 3 years now have been fighting against the brutal onslaught by Vladimir Putin. They're fighting to protect their sovereignty, their way of life. And President Trump is throwing the Ukrainian people under the bus, and at the same time betraying people who fight for freedom around the world. You know, Donald Trump likes to pick on people he perceives as weaker. We all know that he made fun of people with disabilities. He likes to pick on people who have differences. But when it comes to other bullies, he is a weak person. He backs down. And that is what we are witnessing with respect to Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump is backing down. In fact, he just today blamed the Ukrainians and President Zelensky for Putin's attack on the Ukrainian people. In fact, he called President Zelensky, a dictator, when it's Vladimir Putin that is the dictator and launched the assault on the Ukrainian people. We should all be ashamed.
The United States and Russia under Trump so visibly decided to negotiate and sought.
Now, you know, a lot of these MAGA people, they don't obviously know a lot about foreign policy. And that is another weakness, because they can't correlate what Ukraine has to do with the United States. They can't correlate what the Middle East has to do with the United States. They can't correlate what Middle Asia has to do with the United States. They can't correlate what Africa and South America has to do with the United States. They can't correlate foreign policy at all. Why? I mean, and obviously with this little mishap with Putin, they have totally missed that this is the guy that represses most Russian people. And on top of that, those Russian people that he represses looks just like those MAGA people too. So he's not beyond oppressing you either, MAGA. That's one thing they don't get. And it's like that in a lot of places. Now, I don't want to make every place be exactly like another place in the world. It's not. But the U.S. is involved in the world in trade. And trade, a part of trade is security. It's that simple. So MAGA people, you get an F. You fail in foreign policy. And it's something you need to address. Now, of course, Americans should want more out of their government. They should. And MAGA people, it sounds like they kind of want that because they keep calling for less spending, right? Because they think less spending is going to equal, somehow a better life for them. No, it's not less spending. The United States makes enough money. It's that they don't spend enough of it, which they easily could, on the foundations of the country. And that is strong society from the ground up, housing, families, education, right? Childcare, right? Healthcare, right? And fair housing. That's how you invest in the foundations of the society. Something like 70, 80% of almost 80% really of the federal budget, that's paid for by if I'm correct, 70%, something like that, by payroll taxes. I don't have the data right in front of me right now, but payroll taxes, that means people that pay salaries, that go to work and get a check for their work. That's what that means. That's not corporations. So right now, we have a situation where our corporation CEOs, they've made more money themselves. They're more successful than they have ever been. However, they're not sharing that with their employees. They're also not supporting policy in the country that supports those employees, everyday people. See, so this is the confrontation. So we don't need to run away from the world, although we might get our ass kicked out of the rest of the world. But we don't need to run away from it. But what we need to do is make sure that these billionaires in our country aren't the only people becoming successful because of the country. That's what needs to change. But in any case,
Saudi Arabia without Ukraine and the European allies face the United States and Russia under Trump so visibly decided to negotiate in Saudi Arabia without Ukraine and the European allies. They distribute photos of this event. And
now let me stop right there. The United States and Russia, they're in the Middle East, and the story is that they're discussing Ukraine without Ukraine, right? But my thoughts is that since Russia so obviously sells weapons and supports the movements that attack Israel, not only that, they help support Iran with logistics, militarily or whatever, right? And also Hamas, Hezbollah. So Russia has always been present in the Middle East. They're always there, a player in the Middle East, right? So a lot of these skirmishes, Russia is the opposing group in the shadows, really supporting a lot of it. And now there's China also. Now, I'm not trying to demonize that people when I say that, right? But just to say that there are other groups opposing whatever is going on. Now, it's not just superpowers that are supporting different sides, but on the ground, there are different people on different sides, and they want help. So if one group, for example, is getting support from Russia, they know that Russia won't support the other group fighting against their group. So that means that group wants supplies and weapons from someone else. It's very simple. And that's where the United States finds itself in a lot of these situations. Do you want to pull out of that? Will pulling out of that help you? Will it help your trade? Will it help your security? The answer is no. But again, because of MAGA people, you might get your ass kicked out of there. Like, really, if you don't get it together very, very fast, the clock is ticking. How many days? We don't know, but it's days.
And the reason why they do this is not just because Trump wants to give everything to Putin, not have any other input, despite the fact that Europe has actually spent more defending Ukraine than we have, and they have more at stake because obviously they're much closer to Ukraine and Russia. No, he also
And
does.
that's another thing, I'm so glad that she's bringing this up. I mean, there's this idea that somehow the US has paid more, supported Ukraine more than Europe. That's a fallacy. And why people don't clearly hear that over and over and over in the media, it's strange because it's one of Trump's talking points. It shouldn't be us carrying the burden for them. No, what it was teamwork before, and without teamwork, that sounds very interesting. That thought, but we're all along for this ride, so let's see.
This because it is a matter of respect. He is disrespecting our allies and disrespecting Zelensky. There's a reason why that photo went out everywhere. You don't always see photos of when the countries get together to negotiate. The photo was meant to be an embarrassment, a sign of disrespect, because Trump, the thing that he is best at is being a bully, for being rude, for being hateful. And he is saying to our allies, the countries that have banded together with NATO and trade partnerships, negotiations to keep our world safe after our major world wars. He's saying to them, not only do we not need you because now we have Putin, the dictator, as our friend, but he's basically flipping them the middle finger in a way of such disrespect that shortly after, of course, the European leaders met within 3 days to gather together because they realize, they understand the implications of what Trump is doing. How he not only wants to do things his way, but he wants to destroy the things that are so important to American values.
I don't know. I don't think yeah, he wants to destroy the allies. He wants to destroy the USA and MAGA people. Again, if you want the USA to be destroyed, I understand why you would support Trump. But if you don't, I completely do not understand anymore. And I didn't understand before and never would understand. But just for the sake of argument, even at this point, I mean, let's forget the past. What about now? Do you still support this? Because again, liberals have said, many people knew, not even just liberals, but also conservatives. You know, I'm pretty conservative myself, but I could see Trump being the death of the United States just from far away, long time ago. It didn't even cross my mind to support him just on that basis alone. You know, knowing that what he supports only brings down the U.S. But why couldn't MAGA people see this? I don't get it.
About allies and friendship. Take a listen.
They're also.
Oh, I forgot. It's the disinformation. That's why they didn't see it. Sorry about that.
Here's about allies and friendship. Take a listen.
They're also fighting to protect the rules-based order that keeps us all safe around the world and has for close to 80 years now. This period of peace, stability, prosperity for the world happens because we had rules around borders, around not invading your neighbors, that Russia chose deliberately to violate a number of years ago. That is why Canada and our allies are unequivocal on standing up against Vladimir Putin's illegal, immoral, unjust violations of the international order, and why I'm looking forward to sitting down with my European partners in a couple of hours to talk about how we will continue to stand unequivocally in defense of Ukraine, but also in defense of the rules that keep us all safe.
He says that Zelensky has a 4% approval rating. The numbers that we have seen are more in the 50% range, north of 50% range. And he's criticizing Zelensky for
and what she means is over 50%.
not holding elections. Now, clearly, this is something that Russia would like to see happen because they would love to get a Yanukovych or somebody who, is much more favorable to Russia into that seat. Is the president undermining the election process? And can an election take place in the middle of this war at all, General?
Trump is definitely trying to undermine democracy and their constitution, but he's also doing that. Tried to undermine the German elections that just went by yesterday. But we're going to get into it. Watch.
Well, a couple of things. Yeah, Zelensky's polling as of February this month is 57% favorable. It was 52 in December. I mean, it was in the 90s and 22 when the war started. But obviously, he got very favorable rating.
Can't get enough Midas? Check out the Midas Plus Substack for ad-free articles, reports, podcasts.
What if your website's success was only limited by one single thing? Compliance.
Most plausible path is a middle ground scenario. That is, the United States reduces or postpones the tariff on cars, and Europe and Canada suspend retaliation. This compromise would be temporary, perhaps until after the United States elections in 2025. But at least a major crisis would be avoided. Another possibility is a prolonged diplomatic negotiation. Germany and Canada could buy time by saying, let us make the threats, but let us not rush to implement them. Maybe there are voices saying, if Trump is not re-elected, we will sit at the table with the next president. Eyes are on United States domestic politics. In other words, it is unclear how trade policy will take shape in the United States election atmosphere.
You're watching a special edition of The Day with coverage of the German elections. The results show change is on its way. Friedrich Merz of the Conservatives is the man with the best chance of becoming chancellor, but the impressive showing of the far-right alternative for Germany is also our focus. I want to recap the numbers for you briefly. The Social Democrats dropping to 16%, the Conservatives finishing top with around 29%, the Greens at 12%, and the Left Party getting almost 9%, and arguably the...
Now, Trump, he made some statements publicly before this election. Of course, and everyone knows he was trying to bolster up the fascist party, you know, which is pretty soon. I'm pretty curious about like what people are going to do about that, because again, fascist parties that tend to have a lot of fascism concepts and ideas in it, fascist concepts, ideas in them, you know, they still somewhat are protected somehow under freedom of speech. But people are beginning to see how that has been a way for foreign governments like Russia to interfere in elections, but also shape public dissent, right? Make these issues even worse instead of allowing them to improve, you know? And so, but in any case, here are the results.
Winners, the AFD with 20%. And that means the AFD have more than doubled their share of the vote from the 2021 elections. Means the AFD with 20.
So I don't know why they put this part up there. They're talking about the AFD, which is this fascist group like we're talking about. And Trump wanted to bolster their support. And so their support has doubled now. But again, this could easily be election fraud. This could easily be election tampering, which people are finding out and discussing brand new news that there is empirical data in the US right now that has been found that suggests, that does show, prove that the election was tampered with in the US in 7 or 8 swing states. And they compared that data and they found things that that have never shown in the data before that can't be explained. You see, but I'm going to get into that. But let's watch this. In any case, they're starting off with this party who didn't win, but they're talking about they got numbers. But this is the party. The CDU is the party that won, right? And watch what happens. Trump won't like this.
20%. And that means the AFD have more than doubled their share of the vote from the 2021 elections. Alice Weidel is the AFD's pick for chancellor, although it's highly unlikely that she will get that job. Other parties have ruled out working with the far-right group in a coalition government. The 46-year-old is the party's co-chair. She has a doctorate in economics. As a politician, she's known for her anti-migration rhetoric. Weidel and the AFD put...
Now, they don't need the AFD to do a coalition government anyway, but in any
migration at the heart of their program, pledging to carry out mass deportations and an asylum crackdown. They want Germany to abolish the euro. They want to reintroduce the German Deutschmark and potentially, although they took this off of their platform, but still they've talked about it, leaving the European Union. And they've pledged to lift sanctions imposed on Russia over its invasion of...
You see right there, exactly. So just seeing those numbers will have to be looked into because Putin, they have information that says Putin helped with interfering in the elections, and not just in this way where they influenced with disinformation in social media, but also with actual tampering with machine votes, y'all. Seriously. So just keep that in mind.
Ukraine, and they say they want to start sanctions imposed on Russia over its invasion.
But this is not who won. This is not the party who won, and this is not the new prime minister
of Ukraine. And they say they want to start importing Russian gas once again. Well, here is the AfD's co-chair Alice Weidel speaking to party members after the announcement of that result, which will make the AfD the second strongest party in the German parliament.
And as we've seen in the exit polls, what we've seen is that we are the only party who have doubled our position over the last election. Double. They wanted to cut our numbers in half, but the opposite is what has occurred. And one thing is for sure, we will always have an open hand to get involved in a coalition in the German government. The will of Germany is something we will implement. We are always prepared to fulfill the will of the people in a German government.
And with me here at the big table, again, our chief political correspondent, Nina Haase. Benjamin Tallis is with the Democratic Strategy Initiative here in Berlin. And joining us from Washington, D.C. is political scientist and author Yascha Mounk. He's an expert on the crisis of liberal democracy and the rise of populism. Yascha, let's get right to you. About 20% going to the far right, the AfD, both Friedrich Merz and Alice Weidel. They've been promising change for Germany. Do you think change is coming?
I'm not sure it is. I think in terms of public opinion, this election shows a remarkable turnaround. It was about 10 years ago that at the height of a refugee crisis, Germany decided to keep its borders open, to welcome millions of refugees into the country. And there was cross-party consensus on that at the time, including a majority of public opinion, at least temporarily. At this point, it is clear that virtually all parties have significantly departed from that point of view. And the two parties that have been most vocal about that, the Christian Democrats under the leadership of Friedrich Merz, who has changed the party's political course very distinctly compared to his predecessor, Angela Merkel, and of course the AfD under Alice Weidel, are the two big winners of this election today. Now, the problem, of course, is that under Germany's political system at the moment, it's very difficult to effect change, because even when there's clear shifts in public opinion, you end up having a game of musical chairs in which four parties vie for seats and one or perhaps two sit it out, but you always end up getting these ideologically incoherent coalitions between parties with roots on the center-right and parties with roots on the center-left.
Yeah.
And clearly what we're going to see in the next months is the Christian Democrats under Friedrich Merz helming up a government, but with a center-left partner, either the Social Democrats or both Social Democrats and the Greens. And it'll be very hard for that coalition to actually change the country significantly.
Well,
now, just to go back, I want to go back to this data that they showed here. Now, here we are. Now, the AfD is this. They have 20%. So, but look, as you can see here, the Greens have 12. The Left Party has 8. The 48. You see, they can make a coalition government without the AfD. Very simple, right? They can if they want to. So the question is, are they going to reject? Are all of these parties going to reject election interference, foreign interference in the country? Are they going to reject that? And are they going to support Ukraine, or are they going to capitulate? It's a similar thing to like the U.S. So this would be the MAGA Trump base in the U.S. now, but of course that was much larger in the U.S. But so that tells you something also, right? You see, there's a bigger problem in the U.S. with this kind of stuff and trying to export fascism right now. But in any case, this party is very similar to Trump, because if you listen to the rhetoric that the woman said, listen, the leader of the AfD, how she was speaking, she says similar things that Trump said before he ever became president. Like, he seemed a lot more moderate, and he was like promising to work out with Democrats too. No problem. He didn't seem that extreme, did he, Trump, in the beginning? Of course not. but you get to see what it was all about on the tail end. And their rhetoric can be compared. Look,
the Greens
also their policy. They want to open up trade with Putin. They're pro-Putin. They probably got money from Putin and also social media help and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, that's the thing. They also want to, they agree with Trump on Ukraine, essentially, you know.
12%, and the left party getting almost 9%, and arguably the biggest winner.
All right, let me go back to the breakdown of her real quick.
10 years ago, that at the height of a refugee crisis, Germany decided to keep its borders open to welcome millions of refugees into the country. And there was cross-party consensus on that at the time, including a majority of public opinion, at least temporarily. At this point, it is clear that virtually all parties have significantly departed from that point of view. And the two parties that have been most vocal about that, the Christian Democrats under the leadership of Friedrich Merz, who has changed the party's political course very.
Now, one thing that is a little different here is that they already got rid of Musk, the EU, pretty much for trying to interfere with the elections. And you don't know if Elon Musk or, you know, if they had something to do with this increase in votes. Like, again, right now at this moment, there's empirical data that suggests or proves pretty much that the U.S. election was tampered with. Their votes were stolen. Their votes were erased on computers. Like, seriously, it's the breaking news. I'm going to get to that, though.
Distinctly compared to his predecessor, Angela Merkel, and of course the AfD under Alice Weidel are the two big winners of this election today. Now, the problem, of course, is that under Germany's political system at the moment, it's very difficult to affect change, because even when there's clear shifts in public opinion, you end up having a game of musical chairs in which four parties vie for seats and one or perhaps two sit it out. But you always end up getting these ideologically incoherent coalitions between parties with roots on the center right and parties with roots on the center left.
Yeah.
And clearly what we're going to see in the next months is the Christian Democrats under Friedrich Merz helming up a government, but with a center left partner, either the Social Democrats or both Social Democrats and the Greens. And it'll be very hard for that coalition to actually change the country significantly.
Well, with 1 in 5 German voters giving their support for the far right, I mean, does a political consensus that no one will work with the AfD, do you think have a chance of surviving?
I think it depends on what the government now does. I think that there's two areas in which German voters have very clearly expressed their concerns, however one might personally feel about that. The first is that they're clearly showing that they want Germany to have strict control of its own borders, and that they want to make sure in particular that
it's a similar party, so let's skip it. It's a similar party to MAGA, essentially. Same party.
FD.
Yeah, that's what he kept saying during the election.
That law of government
about not working with the AfD.
Yeah, that's what he kept saying during the election campaign. And then we saw a very remarkable moment in the last session of Bundestag just a few weeks ago, where he pushed through a motion that only managed to be successful because the far-right AfD voted with him. And that did cause an outcry, and people accused him of having broken his word. And you do have to say, this is something where a lot of conservatives were reluctant. There is a lot of pressure also from conservative leaders, especially in the East, where the AfD reached some up to 40%. So nationwide, they're at 20, but in the East, in some constituencies, they're looking at 40. And lots of people there from the Conservatives have said for a long time, this is getting really hard for us.
Yeah.
Okay, but in any case, they didn't win the election, and the biggest party is the party that won, and they're willing to work with. All of those parties don't want to work with the AfD. So the only choice they have is to work with the newly elected prime minister and government, right? So that's the short of it. But there's one last thing here that happened because of this. Another change in the Ukraine thing. Zelensky actually offered to change his stance. Now, here it is.
Extraordinary, disturbing, outrageous, and frustrating weeks, perhaps in politics since the end of the Second World War. Today, we're going to be covering a topic, a relatively quick episode which is going to be about Zelensky's rebuff to Trump, an attempt perhaps by Zelensky to call Trump's
This is Silicon Curtain.
bluff. Well, before we get into that, I am working on a number of more lengthy episodes that will examine in detail the outbursts that have come from Trump this week. More things by the time I come to record that will be considered newsworthy, and I'll probably have to rewrite those scripts and start again. But let's jump into this episode now. And thank you to everyone who supports the channel. Thank you to everyone who buys me a coffee or has become a patron. It's incredibly important to help keep the work of the channel going. As I know I say that every time, but it is hugely appreciated and your support is invaluable. It's been a week that has upended the foreign policy world and seen an acceleration towards what some of us have suspected for several years, that the old post-World War II international order is dead. Its norms.
Sorry about that. 2 seconds.
Only live on. World War II international order is dead. Its norms and stability only live on as a zombie concept in the minds of the myopic and timid class of managers that still lead us and who cannot imagine such a scenario or what may replace that international order. Not only that, but the gamekeeper has turned poacher as the US seeks to align itself with Russia, an openly militaristic state run by a dictator for almost 30 years, hooked on wars, genocide, mass torture, rape, and which revels in its role as global terrorist and pariah. This week saw the repetition of Russian talking points nearly word for word by Trump. There can be few who.
And this is what you will see in the AFD also. I mean, this is what people have seen. It's so transparent. Yeah, so
hold any
it's not a conspiracy. Russia interferes in people's elections and sovereignty constantly. That's what they're about.
Doubts about Trump's view of the war against Ukraine. He's openly praised the leader of the aggressor nation and sought to blame the victim for starting the war and not ending it all this time over the last 3 years. Night is day, black is white, up is down. You get the idea. Where doubts have now surfaced is whether the US will continue to provide weapons or even aid to Ukraine, and even that the US are aiding Russia instead of Ukraine and Europe. Trump's comments on Wednesday put old doubts to rest, but triggered a whole.
But do people, MAGA people, even know that this is what Trump is contemplating with their tax dollars? Nope. I mean, if you're an American citizen right now, I don't even understand how they can collect taxes because you don't really have a functioning federal government. I mean, it's functioning by mass, you could say, mechanically functioning. The arms and the limbs are kind of still there, but you're sick right now. There's an infection, and a political infection that is stopping the normal function of the body, really. So I'm curious about Americans and their taxpayer dollars. Like, is this what they wanted? They wanted firings. They wanted this kind of stuff. Okay.
Slew of new ones.
Maybe they want to support Russia too.
Less than 3 years ago, Volodymyr Zelensky received a standing ovation in Congress for resisting Russia's invasion. This week, America's newly elected leader lashed Zelensky verbally, calling him a dictator and accusing him of corruption. That, of course, is rich coming from Trump, the master of failed business ventures and scams that are too numerous.
Oh, hold on 1 second. I think it's another clip here. I went to the wrong clip, but it's the same. It's the same guy, I think. Let me see here. Zelensky offers NATO membership for minerals. This is what it is about. Yeah, this is ridiculous. That was so great. Check this out. This is new. This is breaking. But
this, the Ukrainians say, was a record. 267 drones, they claim, across 13 regions, bringing death and destruction. Russia's present on the eve of the third anniversary of war. It means there won't be a fourth. President Zelensky this afternoon revealed sacrifices he's willing to make.
If it's about peace in Ukraine and you really want me to leave my position, I am ready to do that. Or I can exchange it for NATO membership if there's the opportunity. I'll do it immediately without a long conversation about it. I am focused on Ukraine's security today and not in 20 years. I don't plan to be in power for decades.
It's not just peace being negotiated now, but the terms for US support. Terms which President Zelensky says so far aren't what he wants. Here's why.
I want them to give us something for all of the money that we put up, and I'm going to try and get the war settled, and I'm going to try and get all that death ended. So we're asking for rare earth and oil, anything we can get.
Those items the Ukrainians say they cannot agree to, but they concede they are, quote, ready to share. With the whiff of a deal in the air, the White House press secretary told reporters her boss's mood is bullish.
And the president is very confident we can get it done this week.
What? The man presenting
Confident we can get
boss's mood is bullish.
And the president is very confident.
She said conflict. Listen to that. That is very interesting. Let's see here again.
Boss's mood is bullish.
And the president is very
Conflict. She said the president is very conflict.
Is bullish.
And the president is very
Is bullish.
And the president is very confident we can get it done this week.
The man presenting the
Does that sound competent or confident? It definitely sounds like conflict.
wreath to commemorate Defender of the Fatherland Day in Moscow this afternoon is no ordinary leader. President Putin is a predatory premier who poses a constant threat, Sir Keir Starmer told Labour members in Scotland today.
Russia already menaces our waters, our online spaces, even at times our streets.
Ahead of a trip to Washington this week, the Prime Minister hinting here at what he's expected to state clearly to President Trump, a commitment to UK boots on the ground in Ukraine and a significant boost to defence spending.
We have to be ready to play our role if a force is required in Ukraine once a peace agreement is reached. And we have to be ready to reshape our economy with industrial policy.
Wars aren't just measured in the number of years they've been fought, but the number of lives lost.
All right, so look, everybody is flipping, now on the U.S. essentially. Zelensky is basically saying that, hey, he will also give up the presidency. He doesn't plan on being there for years, but he would gladly do it today if you would let him join NATO, Ukraine join NATO. But of course, Putin doesn't want that. See, Putin is happy taking the land and having his military there to threaten Ukraine later. That's what this is all about. And, so that means the country itself and those people are at stake, literally. So, yeah, in any case, if the Ukraine loses the war, how much money would the U.S. have lost then? See, the U.S. has already invested how many billions in Ukraine? And so what do you want to stop now so you can lose your investment? I mean, that's what doesn't make sense. And that's what Trump is not telling you. He's going to offer you something that sounds good, so you will lose more than anyone else. It's ridiculous. He has an insane backwards policy, Trump. But in any case, let me see here. Do I have this up? Oh, right. Let's go. This is the breaking news with the elections, and Roland Martin brought this forth. So kudos to Roland, and folks, you gotta check this out.
Announced they were disbanding the unit that specifically is charged with
empirical data that suggests and really points to the votes being tampered with in this last election. Check it.
ensuring foreign interference does not impact our elections. Yeah, that's real. Now there are fresh concerns regarding what happened in 2024 presidential election, specifically in Clark County, Nevada. A lot of people were concerned with what was happening there because they were shocked with the Republican turnout in Clark County. They said, hey, significant number of union workers there. It has always been a Democratic stronghold. Now a nonpartisan group called the Election Truth Alliance, or ETA, has wrapped up their independent investigation of voting data from Clark County. They found some unusual patterns that they say could point to, quote, potential vote manipulation. Nathan Taylor, the executive director of the Election Truth Alliance, he joins us right now. So Nathan, just explain to us how y'all define this potential vote manipulation. What did y'all see in terms of these numbers?
Thank you so much for having me. So in terms of what we were looking at in Clark County, Nevada, they published just after the election their vote record, their cast vote record, and that goes down to the tabulation machines and the 3 types of voting. So
one other thing, he says that had Kamala Harris contested the election, some of this information would have come forward more rapidly. Actually, the bodies that monitor elections and do recounts, if she would have called for a recount, some of this data would have been discovered earlier. That's basically what he's saying. But check this out. And it would have
mail in early vote and
it would have been released to the public as well. So yeah.
Just after the election, their vote record, cast vote record, and that goes down to the tabulation machines and the 3 types of voting. So mail in, early vote, and election day. And so what we did is we looked at the statistical distribution of that data, and we compared those 3 types. And we saw that mail-in, it looks statistically normal. Normal distribution, a bell curve pattern. We saw that election day didn't look very anomalous at first, but then we looked at early voting. And early voting is where a majority of the votes were cast during the election for Clark County, Nevada. And when we looked at it, we actually pulled out the distribution and we saw it shows statistical evidence of potential manipulation. And what that means is a portion of both candidates' votes look like they could have been changed. And we see that because instead of a bell curve, it comes out more of a Russian tail as we.
A percentage, here, let's hear that again.
Candidates' votes evidence of potential manipulation. And what that means, Nevada, and when we looked at it, we actually pulled out the distribution and we saw it shows statistical evidence of potential manipulation. And what that means is a portion of both candidates' votes look like they could have been changed. And we
both. So that means, and he's going to tell you why, but what that means is that somehow through these machines or whatever processes, but he's going to explain the exact processes. But what that means is somehow a portion of both candidates' votes were changed or could have been changed, right? And so in Kamala Harris's case, that would have been a person going in to vote on a Democratic ticket. They vote all Democrat, but for some reason for the president, they vote for Trump. Yes, that's what that means. And it could have been a person that voted on a Republican ticket, right? Where it gives you, and you have all these, and they voted all Republican for the other things. I mean, all Democrat for the other things or something, right? And then suddenly for the president, they voted for Trump. But you know, a lot of people that voted on the Republican ticket, they didn't like Trump. See, this is what he's getting at. Now let's listen and hear more.
See that because instead of a bell curve, it comes out more of a Russian tail, as we would call it. And so we delved deeper and we actually pulled data for Washoe County, Nevada. That's the second most populous location. And a little bit about my background. I work in cybersecurity. I was a 25 Bravo computer specialist in the Army Reserves, got my degree in network security and then commissioned at the Army National Guard. And so I worked data analysis for my normal job before kind of stepping into this role and helping found and run the Election Truth Alliance. And so what was concerning about this election and led us to looking into the actual data was, as you mentioned, 7 swing states kind of popped up after the election, and we thought that was strange, given some of the polls, given some of the other analysis, and we dove deeper. Now we're seeing the potential for the vote counting machines to have been manipulated. And so the main concern is the type of manipulation we're seeing in Clark County, Nevada. It's not unique to Clark County, Nevada. We've done analysis on other locations. We're looking at Pennsylvania right now. We were looking at Wisconsin. We were looking at Florida. We were looking at Texas and California. And so many of these higher population centers in these states exhibit the same indications at a higher level. And that's a drop-off vote abnormality, where, for example, one party at the presidential level, they get a certain amount of votes. And then you look at the next down ballot for their party, like the senator or the governor or the superintendent, and you find that those lower positions have more votes than the president. And that's very concerning. And that ultimately also led to us diving a little deeper. So we did provide some graphics, but I don't really think we need the graphics, just to kind of talk about some of the potential.
That's why a lot of people were asking. They were like, wait a minute, hold up. How did he win? How did Trump win all of the battleground states, but the only two places the Republican candidate won in the Senate was Ohio and Pennsylvania? They lost in Wisconsin. They lost in Michigan. They lost in Nevada. They lost in Arizona. And there was no Senate race on the ballot in North Carolina and in Georgia. And in fact, when you look at North Carolina, Democrats won governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and secretary of state.
So what is interesting as well is when people talk about candidate Harris at the time and how she performed, right? Talking about popularity and saying, oh, well, people didn't vote for her. She wasn't popular. People were switching their votes at the presidential level and then voting Democrat all the way out. Well, I looked at this as well, and we pulled some of the data.
You hear that? That is crazy. Who votes all Democrat down and then votes for Trump?
For both all the swing states in this election and last election. And we said, how many votes did Harris get in comparison to Biden in those 7 swing states?
And correct me if I'm wrong, this is the graphic you were referencing, right? Swing versus
this one, yes, this is a drop-off vote analysis. And this was actually made by Smart Elections, which is another organization that does election integrity and analysis.
Go ahead.
So they published this. And what this is showing is this is some of the swing states versus non-swing states. And it looks very suspect that Harris would underperform consistently across just the swing states. And then outside the swing states, she's almost 1 to 2% like Trump is.
For instance, in this first graphic right here, it shows that in the swing states, it shows red 752, blue -189. Yet in non-swing states, it shows red 464 and blue 351. That's just a 103,000 vote difference compared to a nearly 900,000 vote difference. And then when we go over to this graphic right here, this is the percentage. So you see an increase. So the way
you read this, if I may.
Go ahead.
Is the 0% is the next down ballot candidate. So in this case, I believe this is senators. So 0% is how many votes that party's senator or whatnot got. So we see in the swing states, Harris got negative 1.48% less votes than the senator across and on average across all 7 swing states. And then Trump got almost 6% more.
You see that? How is it that someone could vote for the senator in the same state and then vote the other way for Trump for the president? It doesn't make any sense.
Than that senator or that next down ballot candidate. And then outside the swing states, all the other states, we're seeing it look more normal and matching past election trends where you're somewhere between 1 to 2% over the Senate, over the senator or the governor or whatever other races there are. So that's how you read this. That's why it's concerning.
So you're saying that, again, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is that if Harris was just so unpopular, then what you would see in swing and non-swing states would be a decrease or people staying at home and not supporting her. But you're saying, wait a minute, how the hell do you see a plus percentage in non-swing states, but then you see this big negative, as if outside of the 7 battleground states, it was like, yay, we're cool with Harris, but those specific 7 battleground states were like, yeah, we ain't down with it.
I think you highlighted exactly the concern. Why would just the swing states exhibit a pattern? And so that's a huge red flag, because what wins you elections? It's the swing states. And so I actually did the numbers for how Harris compared to Biden from the 2024 election, how many votes she got across all 7 swing states versus what Biden got in 2020. And we find that in 24, Harris exceeded Biden in Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Georgia. I believe those numbers are up to date.
Guys, if we have that graphic, control and pull it up. Go ahead.
I don't believe you have that graphic.
Okay.
And I'll quote some more graphics that I know you do have here in a moment. But this is a good number for you, just to kind of show you how the theory that she's unpopular and that's why she would be underperforming doesn't add up. And that's that she got 99.6% of all the votes cast in 2020, the Democratic votes that turned up in 2020 for those 7 swing states. She got 99.6% of them in 24. So it doesn't make sense that she would be underperforming by a large amount in these states, but then get 99.6% of the same votes.
So, okay. So with that, you believe that something was done to the voting machines? Do you believe that, like, for instance, I've heard people, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and when people, I'm very skeptical when people throw it. I've heard people say, hey, wait a minute. People were using Starlink to transmit the data, the voting data from precincts to the state elections board, and that Starlink, of course, owned by Elon Musk. Of course, Joe Rogan made this famous phrase that Elon Musk created this app that an hour after the polls closed showed, oh, Trump is going to win, I'm going to sleep. And he was like, oh, man, how did he know? And then, of course, Trump leading up to the election was like, hey, don't worry about it. We don't need your votes. We got this. So people are pointing to those things as evidence that something was amiss. So are you saying that you believe that the voting numbers were somehow changed either in the machines or in the transmission to the state elections board?
If we bring up slide 5 here, that's the one that's showing Clark County election day voting. And so
is that it right here?
Distribution. Yep, that's exactly it. This is what I was talking about a little earlier, where when we look at the vote record Clark County gave us and published after the election, this is more what you would expect to see when looking at that data. And so there's 2 different colors. One is red and one is blue. Obviously, the blue is the Democrats for presidential race, which would be Harris, and the red is Trump. And so they are overlapped. But when you pull both of them out, they should look like a bell curve. And in this case, for election day, they look pretty much like a bell curve. You're not seeing any huge issues.
Is this right here, the bell curve? This one right here? This what you're talking about?
That is, I don't believe we referenced the bell curve, but that line, this is an excellent slide. If you look at the line, and this is us pulling early voting out, the black line is what you would expect to see as a bell curve.
Okay.
So that line there, that's overlaid on top of the voting data.
Right.
That is what you would more expect to see. Okay. Now, if you go back to slide 4, I'll actually show you exactly what we were seeing and talk about what would potentially cause this. So comparing this to election day, you notice this does not look the same. It's not a more rounded bell curve, a more random and expected distribution. And so what we're seeing, this is Clark County in 24 at the bottom for early voting and 2020 at the top. And you'll notice.
Wow.
Let's look at 2020 first. So if you zoom in just a little bit, the way you read this graph is the x-axis, the bottom axis, that is how many votes the machine counted. And so each of these little dots, there's a red and a blue. and each of them are a machine that counted the votes where you voted. And so in this case, there's a ridiculous amount of votes for early voting. And we see that those tabulators or those voting machines, in this case, they have, in Clark County, Nevada, they have like polling centers they set up. So you can generally go anywhere. And so what we see is as the amount of votes were cast, the places where there were more votes cast, we see after about, I think for early voting, it's closer to 500-600 votes or so.
So we're going to do this here. We're actually going to switch from my control room to my iPad.
There we go.
So this is okay. So now I'm able to zoom in.
Perfect.
Okay, so this is the top one, and this is the bottom one. Okay, go ahead.
Yes. So let's look at the top first. And x-axis is how many votes the machine counted. Each of these is a different machine. Some machines only counted a handful of votes. Some counted 800 plus. And so the left, the y-axis is the percentage of votes. So the higher up you go, the closer the further up and the closer you get to 100%, you win more votes. And so what we saw when we pulled this data and we did this analysis, in 2020, up until about 450 to 500 votes counted by machine or cast at the machines, it looks normal.
Right. So that's
about
that.
500.
Go ahead. Okay. Then 500, all of a sudden, we see a lot of red above 55%.
Right. We see separation.
Okay.
And so what's interesting is if you kind of break this down into the correlation or the trend, as more votes were cast at higher populations, the Republican Party benefited. And so what was weird about this is in 2020, what was weird about this is counterintuitive to how voting patterns normally are. Well, one, you don't generally see a trend as more votes are cast. You just see a better reflection of how people, generally feel.
Okay.
And the problem is Democrats generally benefit at high populations because they live in high populated areas. So this makes very little sense for either of those reasons.
So this is 2024 right here. Above.
This is 2020 at the top.
Yeah, the top. This is 2020 that we're seeing right here. And this
is 24.
And this is 24. Wow.
So if you use the same concept, we see about from 250 to 300 onwards, that normal distribution just disappears, right? And you see you see aggressive separation.
Right. So this is normal right here. As you say,
the
this is
first
normal.
part is.
This is normal. Then all of a sudden you see these. All of a sudden you see these.
Right. They're talking about this area here, just to make it clear for people. To the left of the mouse, here to the center. From the left to the center of the screen is the area they're talking about, where they're saying that the trends, they don't add up, but they also go against the rest of the data. Like it doesn't make sense. And again, we're talking about tickets. When you get a ticket, you can vote. That you vote for numerous candidates, not just the president, but for others. And what they're finding is that they said they started off by saying Harris and Trump and Harris, both candidates experienced changes that they've never seen before. For example, again, this is what they're saying. People could have voted Democrat down ticket, which could be senator or any other election that happens to correspond according to that state, right? They vote Democrat for those seats, but then voted for Trump for the president. See, and then the opposite happened with Trump. People would be voting that are Republicans, voting for the Democrat down ticket, senator or whatever, and then in the top they voted for Trump for some reason. You see, like that's not usual for Republicans to not vote down ticket. That's not usual. And that's unexplainable because they won more seats. Obviously, they won a lot of seats in the Congress, or I'm sorry, am I saying that right? Maybe I screwed it up, the Senate and Congress before, but they won more seats down ticket, so it doesn't make sense actually, in some of these swing states. They're talking about the swing states right now. Yeah.
Gaps.
Yes. And so you're not supposed to see separation like this. And when we pull out
And this isn't all the swing states, but they've discovered this pattern in a few, and they're going to go and do the other states too to cross correlate the data. But this is Clark County, Nevada, for example.
distribution, the slide we were looking at before, you can go, I think, two slides or so. You had the bell curve slide. And I'll show you exactly why this is concerning and what this potentially means. So there's a slide with both Harris and Trump, and they have a bell curve overlaid. It's a red and a blue graph. And that's actually that distribution we were just talking about for early voting, but in a different way to analyze it.
All right.
And so what we see,
let me find
is
that
when we look, instead of the normal bell curve for early vote.
And kudos to the folks. I don't know what this guy's name is who collected this data, or did he? It's a organization, one of the organizations that collects data, but they all collect from the same data. Kudos to them and their work, and kudos to Roland Martin for sharing this info.
Voting,
is this it right here? I want to make sure is this it?
This is election day. This is great. So this is your other way of looking at it. Notice election day generally fits the bell curve pattern, right?
Right.
Yeah. But there's a little bit of weirdness at the top.
Right.
And I can say we looked at Washoe County, which was the other county in Clark County, Nevada, and we do see the same issue, more aggressive for election day there and in 2020. So what we're thinking potentially happened, if you go to the next distribution slide and we look at early voting, but for this type of graph.
This here?
Here, perfect. So this, as I said, when you look at this statistically, and we have, so in the Election Truth Alliance, we have people with experience in statistics, data analysis. We have people with medical and engineer degrees. We have a little bit of everything. And so what we've done is we said, instead of this matching a normal distribution like you would expect to see, it shows potential manipulation. And what's concerning is, if we look at the top one, there's a concept here where if you want to win an election, or in this case, for voting data and distribution, the further right a majority of your votes are, after the 50% mark, you win. That's how you win in this case. And so what we're seeing, specifically in early voting, because it's so aggressive, we're seeing that a portion of the distribution is missing. And so this suggests, since in this case, this is candidate Trump, it suggests that his distribution shows that he's benefiting from potential manipulation. That votes, if you look at the bottom, Harris is missing a portion of hers, and since she's at a lower percentage, we see that skew. And so the way this could indicate is it has a rightward skew, and Trump has a leftward skew. And a leftward skew, or another term, is a Russian tail. And so a Russian tail is a term coined by Russian data scientists and data analysts in reference to a few different potentially manipulated Russian elections. And so they coined the term of a leftward skew. Like if you go up, and I believe we also have a reference in this document, but it's, if you benefit from potentially moving votes around, you're going to have this leftward skew like we're seeing in Clark County, Nevada for early voting.
Now, what's interesting here, when you, I remember, so John Ralston is considered like the preeminent journalist when looking at data. And I remember every day he was tweeting and was shocked at the Republican numbers. And it was like, Democrats are in trouble in Clark County. And it was like, they're down. And people were like, oh my, I remember there was some culinary worker who had made a comment about, we were in some serious trouble. And a lot of people, they were just shocked and stunned at the early voting numbers that were coming back, that was giving this indication that Republicans were just going crazy voting in Nevada.
So what's interesting is when people talk about election night, there's an expected pattern you see as votes come in because of time zones. And so Smart Elections actually recently posted a video on their YouTube, and it was referencing
time zones. What time did you vote? They examine every election this way, in depth with different looking at different aspects of the data, right, and doing comparative analysis, right?
Someone talking about what you would expect to see on election night. And so generally, like the Northeast, as their polls close, they're more Democrat. So you would see a little bit of a blue lead, and then Florida would come in and it would go red. And then you would get the middle Rust Belt areas and it would go a little deeper red. And then the West Coast would come in last. And then you'd see that blue wave resurface, right? And so you'd see a little bit of a red mirage is what it is. What's interesting is this election night, you didn't see that. And what you saw is after the first bit of votes came in, it stayed very positive for the Republicans, and it only grew. You didn't see a bounce back. You didn't see a resurgence. And so some people would quote that to see it almost looked algorithmic in the way the votes slowly crept up. And what's concerning is, as you mentioned before, how could you have done this if you could have done this? So I get this a lot, especially with my background. People talk about, our election is secure. Our election isn't hackable. We spent 4 years arguing, everything's good. And so what's funny is when you actually look at our election systems, it's not that our election systems are secure or they're not. It's that every state runs their own election. We have a few different types of machines and we have paper trails. And that's how we should be securing our elections. The problem is, let's actually look at how every state runs their elections. All of them have different procedures. There's no standard guideline for how you should do it.
Right.
But even then, they still have checks and balances they take account. The problem is we only really use, for our tabulation machines and our voting machines, we only really have 2 main brands. And both of them, as we found in the last little bit of our analysis, both of them, I think 70% of the vote counting machines used in the country for elections have had issues of cybersecurity specialists mentioning potential vulnerabilities. And so first of all, if you were to manipulate our machines,
first of all, what are those 2? So there are 2. Who are they?
I can't say the name of the brands myself.
Okay.
But the top 2 that you're going to, see, they should be pretty apparent. And as you mentioned, as you asked before, how would you do this? Well, you would, as you said, I think you would do it at the tabulation level. So some states, they have voting machines and then they transfer their votes, or they scan in paper ballots. And the tabulators are what's doing all that work. And so, as I said, there's 2 main brands. And if you were to compromise those tabulators, you could change the outcome of an election because you could just change votes. And it's that simple. Or you could.
Okay. Can I pull this up real quick? Let me see something. Who are the 2 brands? Okay. What 2 brands of tabulators are used in USA elections? Let me see here. 2 main brands. That is ES and S, Election Systems and Software, Dominion Vote, and Dominion Voting Machines. Those 2 companies. And it says these companies provide optical scan tabulators and other voting equipment used in various states across the country. Some jurisdictions also use Hart InterCivic machines, but ES and S and Dominion are the most widely used. Okay.
Change the data in transit from the tabulators. Either way would look the same on paper.
Okay.
Any questions or input on that?
So
either way, it would look the same on paper. So yeah, I'm inclined. First of all, Kamala Harris didn't contest the election. Had she asked for a recount, or not contest, but had she asked for a recount, which she didn't, all of these things, this analysis would have been done much faster and come forth. I don't know if it would have been before, but it is likely because this is just data. It's going on comparisons of every other election that's ever happened. So this is how they look at it. So they do have established patterns that they know and trends that they follow, including what time did you vote? That's how, does it match with the time that you, the time, what did they call it? The time zone you live in. Exactly. Does it match that? Does that pattern look the same from the year before or the last 10 years or 20 years or 50 years? You see?
Well, I'm gonna go to my panel in a minute with
I'm inclined to believe it, and not just believe it, but want to know more about it.
questions. All right. So when you hear Republicans say we need to get away from these machines and go to paper ballots, what do you say?
I don't disagree that paper ballots or a paper trail is good. The problem is we actually have to use them. This election, I think there were 3 substantial audits that I looked at, Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. And all 3 of those audits, in my opinion, were not effective in doing what they needed to do, which was to validate the presidential race. Pennsylvania conducted I believe it was a risk limiting audit for maybe 2%. And they did the Treasury, and they didn't even poll an appropriate amount of Philadelphia, which is like over 10% of their voting population. So it's things like that, where if you don't set standards for what would actually catch manipulation, like we're saying potentially happened, and we're seeing indication of with the statistical evidence. And as I said, we're working on Pennsylvania and doing a statistical analysis like this. And I recently posted a video where we're seeing the same trend of, as more votes are counted, the Republicans start to lead as if a change was occurring in Philadelphia and in Erie County. And so I think the problem is, if you spent 4 years discrediting election integrity, because that's the difference. This is an election denial. This is election integrity. Right. It's not that we want to question the results. We want to validate that our machines are accurate, and that's why you should do audits. It's not about anything else. And so these audits were not efficient. These audits did not pass the standards, and they didn't even appropriately audit the races that could have been manipulated. And so to hold up, and Georgia and Arizona, they had their own different forms of audits, risk limiting audits, I believe. And I actually looked at those, and other data analysts and statisticians looked at them and said, hey, this isn't matching up either. There's some concerns of, these numbers don't really show. There were some errors in the reporting, and some previously reported numbers didn't match some in numbers, among other things. And so realistically, the way you should deal with our system is you use the machines. The machines are good. And then you immediately conduct audits at any point, and you appropriately sample the population, and you look at the presidential race. You can look at other races too, and you would pretty much quickly see concern. The problem is our system wants recounts. And so we meet a threshold to do a recount automatically.
Yep.
And the candidate doesn't ask for one. It doesn't get done. It doesn't get checked. And so that's the issue we ran into this election.
Exactly.
Questions from the panel. Scott, you first.
Wow.
Yeah, maybe. I listened to your data. I'm a former state party chair. I've run at least 4.
All right, I'm gonna cut it here, folks. You should check this one out, because they're gonna have some commentary on it as well. And let me put it in the link real quick before I'm out for the day. Roland Martin, yeah, kudos to Roland for this interview and the information that came forth, and the company and the representative that did the analysis. 100. That's definitely some good information, and I hope people research and don't. Right. Okay, I'm back, folks. Peace out, everybody. Thanks for another couple of hours for today. Research this information. Don't believe me, and don't believe anyone, but research it and find out for yourself. It's going to be some interesting changes again to American citizens. Folks, the ones that are out there protesting and marching, kudos to you. And that's exactly what's needed. And the ones that's in the courts, Democrats included, on the ground in the courts, dealing with the executive orders and the law, matters of law and the Constitution. Thank you also in the courts, and the judges that have been doing their job. But ultimately, the situation is not good. How much havoc has to go on? How hard will it have to get? And how bad will it have to get? Who knows? It's up to the American people. I'm out, y'all. I'll catch everybody.